Good evening. Tonight, settle into stillness as we explore timeless Buddhist wisdom that has the power to change how you see yourself, your life, and the world around you. These ancient teachings have traveled across centuries, carried by monks and teachers who understood something profound about the nature of suffering and the path to inner peace. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from in the comments. Your presence here, wherever you are, is part of this shared journey toward rest and understanding. Let your body sink a little deeper into whatever supports you now. Feel the weight of your head against the pillow. Notice how your breath moves in and out, requiring nothing from you. The air is cool as it enters, warm as it leaves. Just this simple rhythm, continuing on its own. Tonight's stories come from mountains and monasteries, from riverbanks and marketplaces, from teachers who lived hundreds of years ago and yet somehow knew exactly what weighs on your heart right now. They understood the anxiety that keeps you awake, the regrets that replay in your mind, the endless striving that never quite leads to peace. Each story carries a teaching, not the kind that demands you become different, but the kind that helps you see what's already here, already true, already available. Take one more deep breath. Hold it gently. Let it go. We begin. The burning house. In ancient China, there lived a wealthy merchant whose home stood 3 stories tall, filled with silks and jade, porcelain bowls painted with cranes, and furniture carved from sandalwood that perfumed every room. The merchant had 5 children, and they spent their days lost in play, racing from room to room with the abandon of those who believe the world exists only for their delight. One afternoon, while the merchant was away conducting business in the city, a fire started in the kitchen. Perhaps a coal rolled from the stove. Perhaps a gust of wind carried a spark through the open window. However it began, the flames spread quickly, climbing the wooden beams, blackening the painted screens, consuming the silk curtains in bright orange waves. The children, playing in the uppermost floor, noticed nothing. They were absorbed in their games, their laughter filling the air, their small feet pounding on the floorboards. Downstairs, the smoke thickened. The fire crackled louder. The heat intensified. A neighbor spotted the flames and ran to find the merchant, who raced back through the narrow streets, his heart hammering against his ribs. When he arrived, smoke poured from the windows. He could hear his children's voices, still laughing, still playing, utterly unaware that the house was burning around them. He ran to the door and shouted up the stairs, "Children, come down immediately. The house is on fire." But the children, so absorbed in their play, barely heard him. In a moment, "Father," one called back. "We're in the middle of a game." The merchant's mind raced. He knew the truth. In moments, the stairway would collapse. The ceiling would cave. He had only seconds to act. So he called out again, this time with a different message. "Children, come quickly. I have wonderful gifts waiting outside. Carts filled with toys. Everything you've ever wanted. But you must come now." At this, the children's interest sparked. They dropped their games and thundered down the stairs, pushing past each other in their excitement. They burst through the door just as the staircase behind them collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning wood. Safe outside, they looked up at their father, eyes wide. "Where are the toys?" they asked. The merchant knelt before them, pulling them into his arms. "You're alive," he whispered. "That's the only gift that matters." The house was burning. You were so lost in your games. You couldn't see the danger. "I had to find a way to bring you to safety." The children looked back at the flames consuming their home, understanding finally what had almost happened. They had been playing while the world burned around them. They had been so absorbed in their small pleasures, they couldn't hear the warning. This story reminds us of something we often forget. We live in our own burning houses. We're so caught up in our distractions, our entertainments, our endless scrolling through screens, and our constant pursuit of the next small pleasure, that we don't notice the fire. We don't see what's consuming us. The burning house is our stress that we ignore until it makes us sick. It's the relationship we keep neglecting until it breaks. It's the work that drains us but we tell ourselves we'll address later. It's the anxiety we medicate with busyness instead of actually facing. We're so absorbed in our games, we miss the smoke. Think about your own burning houses. What are you ignoring right now that you know needs your attention? Maybe it's your health. Your body's been giving you signals for months, years even, but you're too busy to listen. The fire is spreading. Or maybe it's your inner life. You're exhausted, running on empty, but you keep pushing because that's what you've always done. The beams are starting to crack. The Buddha understood this. He called it the house of delusion. We build these structures of belief about what will make us happy. We fill them with possessions and achievements and distractions. And then we wonder why we feel trapped. Why we can't breathe. Why nothing quite feels right. The merchant didn't lecture his children. He didn't shame them. He simply found a way to wake them up, to get them to move before it was too late. That's what these teachings do. They're not about making you feel guilty. They're about helping you see clearly. About giving you permission to finally pay attention to what matters. Notice what burning houses exist in your life. Not to judge yourself, but simply to see. The first step toward freedom is awareness. Just seeing the fire doesn't mean you failed. It means you're finally awake enough to do something about it. Let yourself rest with this. You don't have to fix everything tonight. You don't have to figure it all out right now. Just notice. Just see. Just allow yourself to acknowledge what you've been avoiding. The children survived because they finally heard the call. They finally moved. And that's all that's being asked of you. Not perfection. Not having it all together. Just the willingness to wake up. To see. To take one step toward the door. Breathe now. Let your eyes close if they haven't already. The story stays with you, working on its own, requiring nothing more from you tonight. The bamboo in the storm. In a mountain monastery in Vietnam, a young monk named Lin arrived full of determination. He had left his family, his village, everything comfortable, to pursue enlightenment. He meditated from dawn until late into the night. He studied the sutras until his eyes burned. He was serious, disciplined, committed. But Lin had a problem. He couldn't tolerate any disruption to his practice. When the rain drummed on the roof during meditation, he felt his jaw clench. When a fellow monk coughed, he felt irritation rise in his chest like a flame. When birds sang outside his window at dawn, he resented them for disturbing his concentration. One afternoon, during meditation, The wind picked up. It howled through the trees, rattling the windows, whistling through the gaps in the wooden walls. Lin's irritation grew with each gust. His shoulders tensed. His breath became shallow. He was supposed to be meditating, finding peace, but instead he was at war with the wind. After the meditation session ended, he approached the elderly teacher. "Master Hien, how can I find peace when the world won't stop disturbing me?" he asked, frustration sharp in his voice. Master Hien smiled gently. He gestured for Lin to follow him outside. They walked through the monastery grounds, past the vegetable garden where lettuce grew in neat rows, past the small pond where carp moved lazily beneath the surface. They walked to the edge of the property where a grove of bamboo grew tall and dense. The wind was still strong. It rushed through the bamboo forest with a sound like rushing water, and the bamboo swayed, back and forth, bending deeply, their tops nearly touching the ground. "Watch the bamboo," Master Hien said quietly. They stood in silence. Lin watched the bamboo bend and sway. The wind gusted stronger, and the bamboo bent even further. But they didn't break. They didn't resist. They simply moved with the force, allowing it to pass through them and around them. "Do you see?" Master Hien asked. "The bamboo doesn't fight the storm. It doesn't tense against the wind. It bends. It flows. And when the storm passes, it returns to center, unharmed." He turned to Lin. "But look over there." He pointed to a large oak tree nearby. Its trunk was thick and solid. Its branches were rigid. And even as they watched, one of those branches cracked with a sound like thunder, splitting away from the trunk and crashing to the ground. "The oak is strong," Master Hien said. "But in its strength, it's brittle. It resists the wind. It fights. And in fighting, it breaks." Lin understood suddenly. He had been the oak, rigid, resisting, fighting against every sound, every disturbance, every imperfection in his practice. And in that resistance, he was breaking. His peace was shattering. His calm was cracking. "The wind isn't your enemy," Master Hien continued. "The noise isn't your problem. Your resistance to them is what causes your suffering. Be like the bamboo. Bend. Flow. Allow. When the cough comes, let it come. When the rain falls, let it fall. When your mind wanders, let it wander and gently return. Don't make enemies of the natural movements of life." This teaching touches something deep in many of us. We're so often at war with the noise our neighbors make, at war with the traffic that makes us late, at war with the way our partner chews food or the way our colleague speaks in meetings, at war with our own thoughts, our own emotions, our own imperfections. And in that war, we suffer, not because the world is intolerable, but because we're refusing to bend. We're insisting that things should be different than they are. We're resisting reality itself. Think about what you're resisting right now. Maybe it's the way your life has turned out. You had plans, dreams, expectations, and reality didn't cooperate. So you hold yourself rigid against what is, fighting it, resenting it, wishing it were different. The wind keeps blowing, and you keep resisting, and you wonder why you feel like you're breaking. Or maybe it's smaller things. The way your body looks, the way your mind works, the limitations you live with, the circumstances you can't change. You fight them every day, and every day you're exhausted by the fighting. The bamboo teaches us another way. Not passive acceptance, where we stop caring, not giving up where we lose ourselves, but a kind of wise flexibility, a willingness to acknowledge reality without making it our enemy, to bend with what we can't control, to flow with what we can't change, and to save our energy for what actually matters. When someone cuts you off in traffic, you can be the oak or the bamboo. The oak tenses, grips the steering wheel, lets anger flood through every muscle. The oak carries that anger home, into dinner, into the evening. The oak is still replaying it days later. But the bamboo bends. Someone's in a hurry. Someone's having a hard day. The moment passes. Life continues. The bamboo returns to center. Let yourself be bamboo tonight. Whatever tensions you're carrying, whatever resistances have hardened in your body and mind, see if you can soften just slightly. Not giving up. Not surrendering your values or your boundaries. Just allowing the wind to blow without fighting it. Just bending a little more easily with what you cannot control. The storm will pass. It always does. And if you haven't broken yourself in the fighting, you'll still be here, whole, returning to center. Rest in this knowing. Let the bamboo sway in your mind. Let your own resistance soften, even just a breath's worth. The lost ox. There was once a farmer named Chen who woke one morning to discover his ox had wandered away during the night. The ox was his most valuable possession. Without it, he couldn't plow his fields. Without plowing, he couldn't plant rice. Without rice, his family would go hungry. Panic seized him. He ran into the village, asking everyone he met, "Have you seen my ox? Have you seen my ox?" No one had. He searched the nearby fields, calling out, his voice growing hoarse. He walked the paths through the forest, looking for tracks, finding nothing. Days passed. Chen searched from sunrise to sunset. He barely ate. He didn't sleep. His wife begged him to rest, but he couldn't. The ox was gone. His future was gone. Everything depended on finding it. He traveled to distant villages, describing his ox to strangers. He climbed hills to scan the valleys. He waded through streams. He grew thin and exhausted, his clothes dirty, his feet blistered. People began to whisper about him. "Poor Chen," they said. "He's lost his mind along with his ox." One evening, as the sun set orange and gold behind the mountains, Chen found himself on a road he'd never traveled before. He was lost now, miles from home, with no idea which direction to turn. His desperation had brought him so far from everything familiar. An old monk happened to be walking along the same road. He saw Chen's distressed face and stopped. "What troubles you, friend?" he asked gently. "My ox," Chen said, his voice breaking. "I've lost my ox. I've searched everywhere. I can't find it. Without it, I'm ruined." The monk nodded slowly. Then he asked a strange question. "Tell me, when you ride your ox, Do you search for your ox? Chen looked at him, confused. What? No, of course not. If I'm riding it, I don't need to search for it. Exactly, the monk said with a slight smile. And tell me, right now, what are you doing? I'm searching, Chen said, frustration rising. I told you, I've been searching for days. And what, the monk asked softly, is this searching? Chen opened his mouth to answer, but the words stopped in his throat. What was his searching? He was walking. He was looking. He was thinking about the ox, worrying about the ox, imagining life without the ox. But what was actually doing all of this? What was the source of this searching itself? The ox you're looking for, the monk said, is the ox you're riding. Your true nature, the thing you need most, is not something you've lost. It was never absent. You're searching everywhere for something that's right here. You're exhausting yourself chasing what you already have. In that moment, something shifted in Chen. He saw how he'd been living, always searching for the next thing that would make him happy, always feeling like something was missing, something was wrong, something needed to be found or fixed or achieved before he could finally be at peace. But peace wasn't at the end of the search. It wasn't in finding the ox. It was in recognizing that he had never actually lost himself. He had only believed he had. Chen returned home. And yes, he found his ox there, grazing contentedly in the back field where it had wandered that first morning. It had never been lost at all. This story speaks to something so many of us experience. We spend our lives searching for the perfect relationship that will complete us, searching for the right career that will fulfill us, searching for the accomplishment that will prove us, searching for inner peace in meditation retreats and self-help books and healing modalities. And the searching itself becomes the problem. We're convinced that peace is somewhere else, somewhere in the future, somewhere we haven't reached yet. We tell ourselves, when I lose weight, when I make more money, when I find my purpose, when I heal my trauma, when I figure it all out, then I'll be okay. Then I'll finally rest. But the ox was never lost. Your fundamental nature, your basic wholeness, your capacity for peace was never actually absent. You've been riding it the entire time you've been searching for it. Think about this in your own life. How much energy have you spent searching for what's already here? How many books have you read looking for an answer that you already know deep down? How many times have you thought happiness was just around the corner, only to get there and find yourself still searching? The searching mind is exhausting. It keeps you perpetually dissatisfied, perpetually incomplete, perpetually in pursuit of the next thing. It tells you that rest is something you have to earn, that peace is something you have to achieve, that you're somehow broken and need to be fixed. But what if you're not broken? What if nothing is actually missing? What if this moment, exactly as it is, with all its imperfections and uncertainties, is enough? What if you are enough, right now, without changing a single thing? This doesn't mean you stop growing or learning or improving your life. It means you stop treating yourself like a problem to be solved. It means you recognize that the foundation of peace is already here. You're already riding the ox. You've been riding it your whole life. The searching can rest now. Just for tonight. You don't have to look for anything. You don't have to figure anything out. You don't have to chase any answer or pursue any achievement. Everything essential is already here, already present, already yours. Let that sink in. Let it settle into your bones. You're not missing anything. You're not lacking anything. The search can pause. The striving can soften. You're already where you need to be. Breathe. Rest. The ox is here. It always was. The pool of still water. In a temple courtyard in Tibet, there was a pool of water so perfectly still that it reflected the sky like a mirror. Monks would sometimes sit beside it during meditation, using its stillness as a reminder of the mind's true nature. One day, a young nun named Pema arrived at the temple, carrying a heavy burden of grief. Her mother had died suddenly, and Pema was drowning in sadness, anger, questions without answers. She couldn't meditate. She couldn't concentrate on her studies. Every moment, her mind churned with emotions. An elderly nun, seeing Pema's distress, invited her to sit by the pool. They sat in silence for a while, watching the water's surface reflect the clouds drifting overhead, the blue of the sky, the distant mountains. Then the elderly nun picked up a stick and plunged it into the water, stirring vigorously. The water became clouded. The reflection disappeared. Mud from the bottom rose in brown swirls. The clarity was gone, replaced by murky chaos. "This," the nun said, "is your mind right now, stirred up by grief, by anger, by confusion. You can't see clearly through it. You can't find your reflection in it." Pema nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes, that's exactly how she felt. Murky, confused, lost in swirling emotions that made it impossible to think straight or feel at peace. "Watch," the nun said simply, and they sat. Slowly, gradually, the water began to settle. The mud started to sink back to the bottom. The brown clouds thinned. First, just a hint of sky appeared in the reflection. Then more, and more. And eventually, after patient waiting, the water returned to its mirror-like state. Still, clear, reflecting everything perfectly again. "I did nothing," the elderly nun said softly. "I didn't try to clear the water. I didn't scoop out the mud or filter the dirt. I simply stopped stirring. I let it be. And the water's nature is to become clear again. It always returns to clarity when we stop disturbing it." She turned to Pema. "Your mind is like this water. Right now, it's stirred up. You're in pain, and that's completely natural. Grief is meant to be felt. But you don't need to fix your mind. You don't need to force yourself to stop feeling or thinking or hurting. You just need to stop stirring. Stop fighting with your emotions. Stop demanding that you should feel differently than you do. Let the grief be there. Let the anger be there. Let the confusion be there. And gradually, in its own time, your mind will clear again. Clarity is your nature. You just have to stop disturbing it. This teaching is so simple, yet we rarely apply it. When we're upset, anxious, sad, or angry, our instinct is to fix it immediately. We stir the water more, trying to clear it by force. We judge ourselves for feeling bad. We try to positive think our way out of pain. We distract ourselves, numb ourselves, busy ourselves. All of that is just more stirring. Think about a time you were anxious, really anxious. Your mind racing, your chest tight, your thoughts spiraling. What did you do? Probably tried to make it stop. Told yourself you shouldn't feel this way. Tried to think your way out of it, analyze it, figure out why you felt like this and how to make it go away. And did all that effort calm you down? Or did it just make the anxiety worse, more complicated, more sticky? The water teaches a different way. When anxiety arises, let it be there. Don't add more to it with your resistance. Don't stir it up with your fighting. Just let it be there, the way you'd let clouds pass through the sky. Observe it without judgment. The anxiety is just mud that got stirred up. If you stop churning it, it will settle on its own. Or think about sadness. Real, deep sadness. The kind that sits in your chest like a heavy stone. We're so uncomfortable with sadness. We try to cheer ourselves up immediately. We tell ourselves we should be over it by now. We feel guilty for bringing others down with our mood. All of this is fighting with the sadness, stirring the water. But sadness, when it's allowed to simply be, moves through you. It settles. It doesn't disappear, but it clarifies. The raw, unbearable edge of it softens. You can see through it again. You can function even while carrying it. The water clears. This applies to anger, to frustration, to disappointment, to all the difficult emotions we spend so much energy trying to escape or suppress or transcend. They're just mud in the water. They're meant to be there sometimes. Life stirs up the pool. Loss stirs it up. Injustice stirs it up. Disappointment stirs it up. That's not a problem. That's just what happens when you're alive and care about things. The problem is the constant stirring we add on top. The judgment, the resistance, the belief that we shouldn't feel this way, the desperate attempts to force ourselves back to clarity before we're ready. Tonight, whatever's stirred up in you, just let it be. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to understand it or resolve it or make it go away. Just stop stirring. Let yourself feel what you're feeling without fighting it. Let the thoughts come and go without grabbing onto them. Let the emotions be there without demanding they leave. Your nature is clarity. Your mind will settle, not by force, not by effort, but by simply allowing, by stopping the constant churning, by trusting that stillness returns when you stop disturbing it. Rest now. Let the water be. Let it settle in its own time, in its own way. You don't have to do anything. Just be. Just breathe. Just let the mud sink back down to where it belongs. The honey with poison. In a forest at the edge of a great kingdom, there lived a deer with a coat like burnished copper, whose grace made even the trees seem to pause in admiration. This deer had a refined palate, seeking out only the sweetest grasses, the most tender shoots, the clearest streams. One day, a hunter came to that forest. He was clever and patient, and he understood the deer's nature well. So he mixed a deadly poison with wild honey, the sweetest honey from the oldest hives, and placed it on a flat stone in a clearing where the deer often passed. The deer came at dusk, when the light turned golden and the air smelled of pine. She caught the scent of the honey and approached cautiously. She'd never tasted anything quite like it. The sweetness was intoxicating, richer than anything she'd known. She licked it once, then again, then couldn't stop herself. The pleasure was too intense. The poison worked slowly. At first, she felt only the sweetness, the intense satisfaction of her craving being met. But then came the burning in her stomach, the weakness in her legs, the confusion in her mind. By the time she understood what had happened, it was too late. She lay down in the grass as the evening deepened into night. The stars came out above her, countless and cold. And in her last moments, she understood. The thing she desired most was the thing that destroyed her. The pleasure she couldn't resist carried her death within it. This old Buddhist parable speaks to something we all experience but rarely want to examine. We're all that dear sometimes, pursuing pleasures that carry poison we can't quite see. Or we see it, but the sweetness is so compelling we tell ourselves it'll be different this time. This time we won't get hurt. Maybe it's a relationship you know isn't good for you. Every time you go back, you tell yourself it'll be different. The honey is so sweet. The attention feels so good. The familiarity is so comforting. But there's always the poison mixed in. The disrespect, the inconsistency, the way you feel smaller after being with them, the way your peace gets disturbed for days after. You know it's there, but the sweetness pulls you back again and again. Or maybe it's a habit you can't seem to break. Shopping until your credit cards max out. That moment of buying something new carrying such a rush of pleasure, followed by the sick feeling of regret, the stress of debt, the clutter accumulating in your home, or drinking just a little too much, just a little too often, the loosening and lightness feeling so needed after a hard day, followed by the fog of the next morning, the lost hours, the slow erosion of your health, or maybe it's digital life. The endless scrolling that feels like relaxation but leaves you feeling empty. The comparison that comes from social media, the poison of measuring your life against everyone else's highlight reel. But you keep going back because there's something sweet there too. Connection, distraction, the feeling of being part of something. The teaching here is not that all pleasure is bad. That's not what the Buddha taught. Pleasure itself isn't the enemy. The deer wasn't wrong to desire sweetness. The problem is attachment to pleasure, the craving that makes us blind to the poison mixed in. The problem is pursuing pleasure without wisdom, without awareness, without the ability to see the whole truth of what we're consuming. Think honestly about the honey with poison in your own life. What do you crave that you know, if you're really honest, isn't good for you? What sweetness keeps calling you back even though you've been hurt by it before? Where are you telling yourself stories, convincing yourself this time will be different, that you can have just the honey without the poison? The wisdom isn't necessarily to give everything up and live like an ascetic. That's one path, but it's not the only one. The wisdom is to see clearly, to stop lying to yourself about what you're consuming, to acknowledge both the honey and the poison, to make conscious choices instead of being pulled along by craving. When you reach for that thing you know hurts you, pause. Just for a moment. See it clearly. Yes, there's honey there. Yes, there will be sweetness. But there's also poison. Can you taste both? Can you hold the full truth of it? And then, with that awareness, choose. Maybe you still choose it, but now you're choosing consciously. with open eyes, accepting the whole consequence. That's different from being blind. Or maybe, with that clarity, you find the strength to walk away, to let the honey stay on the stone, to seek nourishment elsewhere, from sources that don't carry poison, to learn what truly satisfies, what truly sustains, what allows you to live well and wake up clear. Rest now with this awareness. You don't have to change anything tonight. You don't have to give up anything or fix anything. Just see clearly. Just let the truth settle in. The honey is sweet. The poison is real. And you have the wisdom to know the difference, even when the craving is strong. Let your eyes close. Let your body soften. The deer's story is a gift, a warning, a reminder. Let it do its work in you, gently, requiring nothing but your honest seeing. The middle way. In the time of the Buddha, there was a young prince named Siddhartha who left his palace seeking enlightenment. For 6 years, he practiced extreme asceticism. He ate so little that his body became skeletal, his ribs showing sharply beneath papery skin. He slept on beds of thorns. He held his breath until he fainted. He believed that enlightenment required the complete denial of the body, the absolute rejection of physical needs and pleasures. His hair fell out. His eyes sank back into his skull. He could barely walk. Other ascetics looked at him with admiration, convinced he was nearing the highest realization. But Siddhartha felt no closer to truth. Instead, he felt only weakness, confusion, his mind too foggy to see clearly. One day, as he sat beneath a tree, too weak to continue his practices, he heard music floating across the river. A teacher was instructing a student in playing the sitar. The teacher's voice carried clearly across the water. If you tune the string too tight, it will break. If you leave it too loose, it cannot play. The perfect music comes from finding the right tension. Neither too tight, nor too loose. Just right. In that moment, Siddhartha understood. He had spent years in the palace, pursuing every pleasure, every comfort, every indulgence. Finding no truth there, he had swung to the opposite extreme, punishing his body, denying every need, believing suffering was the path. But both extremes were wrong. The string had to be neither too tight nor too loose. He accepted rice milk from a young girl who passed by. His fellow ascetics, seeing this, were horrified. He's given up, they said. He's failed. They abandoned him, disgusted by his weakness. But Siddhartha, his strength slowly returning, sat beneath a Bodhi tree and meditated. Not with frantic effort, not with harsh discipline, but with balanced attention. Present but not straining, focused but not rigid. And there, in that middle way, he found what he had been seeking. Enlightenment came not through extremes, but through balance. We rarely hear this teaching emphasized enough. We live in a culture of extremes. Either push yourself to the absolute limit or give up entirely. Either be perfectly disciplined or completely indulgent. Either work yourself to exhaustion or be lazy. Either eat nothing but vegetables or eat whatever you want. Either meditate for hours daily or don't bother at all. This all or nothing thinking keeps us stuck in cycles. We go hard on the new diet, the new exercise routine, the new self-improvement program. We're perfect for a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month. The string is tuned so tight. And then it snaps. We break. We binge. We give up entirely and swing to the other extreme. The string goes loose, making no music at all. Think about where you're living in extremes right now. Maybe it's how you treat yourself. You're either being incredibly harsh, criticizing every mistake, demanding perfection, or you're being completely permissive, letting yourself off the hook for everything, making no effort at all. Neither extreme serves you. The middle way would be kind accountability, compassion paired with encouragement, acceptance paired with growth. Or maybe it's your work. You either burn yourself out completely, working late into the night, sacrificing everything for your career, or you check out entirely, doing the bare minimum, feeling resentful and disconnected. Neither extreme brings satisfaction. The middle way would be engaged but boundaried, present but not consumed, dedicated but not destroyed. Or maybe it's how you handle emotions. You either suppress everything, pretending you're fine, smiling through the pain, or you drown in every feeling, letting emotions dictate your every action, overwhelmed and reactive. Neither extreme creates peace. The middle way would be feeling without being controlled by the feeling, acknowledging without being consumed, present to emotion without losing yourself in it. The string tuned just right. Not too tight. Not too loose. This is the art of living. This is how music gets made from the instrument of your life. So many of us are exhausted from the extremes. We keep snapping strings. We keep swinging from one pole to the other, never finding the sustainable middle ground. We're either perfect or a disaster, either winning or failing, either on or off. And it's killing us slowly, this inability to find balance. What would the middle way look like for you? Maybe it means eating in a way that nourishes you without obsessing over every calorie or ingredient. Maybe it means exercising regularly but not compulsively. Maybe it means working hard during work hours and then actually resting afterward instead of spending your evening responding to emails. Maybe it means being honest about your struggles without drowning in them. Maybe it means setting boundaries without building walls. Maybe it means caring deeply about things that matter while accepting you can't control everything. The middle way isn't mediocrity. It's not settling or giving up or being lukewarm about life. It's wisdom. It's recognizing that extremes don't work, that the tight string snaps. That balance creates the beautiful sound you're seeking. Tonight, feel where you're too tight, where you're pushing too hard, where you're demanding too much of yourself. Feel the strain. And then feel where you're too loose, where you've given up, where you've stopped trying. Feel the slack. And then, gently, find the place between, the place where effort and ease meet, the place where you can make music with your life instead of breaking strings. This is the path. Not dramatic, not extreme, not impressive to those who don't understand, but it works. It sustains. It leads to the peace you're seeking. Rest in the middle. Let your breath find its natural rhythm. Not forced, not forgotten. Just right. Just enough. Just this. The generous king. In ancient India, there lived a king who was known throughout the land for his extraordinary generosity. His name was Mahasattva, and his heart overflowed with compassion for all living beings. He built hospitals for the sick, shelters for the homeless, schools for children. He distributed grain during famines, paid off debts for those imprisoned, and welcomed travelers to rest in his palace gardens. But his generosity went beyond material gifts. When people came to him with their suffering, he listened with his whole being. When someone needed counsel, he gave his time freely. When someone needed forgiveness, he offered it without hesitation. His ministers often worried he gave too much, that he would deplete the royal treasury, weaken the kingdom through his soft heart. One year, a terrible drought struck the land. The rivers ran dry, crops withered, animals died in the fields. The people grew desperate, their faces hollowed by hunger, their eyes shadowed with fear. The king gave everything he could. Every grain from the royal stores, every coin from the treasury. His own meals became smaller, simpler, so others could eat. But it wasn't enough. People were still suffering, still dying. The king prayed to the gods, asking what more he could do. And in his meditation, an answer came. Not from the gods, but from his own deep knowing. He called his ministers together. "I have heard," he said, "that there are kingdoms across the northern mountains where rain has fallen and harvests are abundant. But they will not give us grain as a gift. They will trade only for something of great value." "What do they want?" the ministers asked. The king was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "They seek rare medicines, living medicines. They believe that the flesh of a king, given willingly, can cure any illness." The ministers gasped. "You cannot mean—" "I do," the king said calmly. "I will offer myself, my life, in exchange for grain to feed the people. What is one life measured against thousands?" Despite the protests of everyone around him, despite his family's tears, despite the pleas of his subjects who loved him, the king prepared to make his final gift. He bathed in the sacred river. He put on simple white cloth. He went to the place where the traders waited. But when he arrived, something extraordinary happened. The earth itself trembled. The sky opened and rain began to fall. Not a drizzle, but a downpour, drenching the parched earth, filling the empty rivers, bringing life back to the land. The traders, witnessing this, fell to their knees. "We cannot take your life," they said. "Your willingness to give it, your complete selflessness, has moved even heaven itself. Keep your life, noble king, and know that your greatest gift was not your wealth or your flesh, but your boundless heart." The king returned to his people. The drought ended, and the story of his generosity passed through generations, a reminder of what it means to give without counting the cost, to love without measure. This story might seem extreme. We're not kings. We're not asked to give our lives. But the teaching here goes deeper than the dramatic gesture. It's about the quality of giving itself. How we give reveals who we are. Most of us give conditionally. We give to get something back. We give to look good, to be appreciated, to feel worthy. We give to the charities that will put our names on a plaque. We give to the people who will return the favor. We give when it's convenient, when it doesn't cost us too much, when we know it will be noticed. But true giving, the kind the king embodied, asks for nothing in return. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't calculate. It doesn't give only when it's easy. It gives because giving is the natural expression of a generous heart. It's not a transaction. It's an overflow. Think about the last time you gave something to someone. Money, time, attention, help. Did you do it freely? Or was there a part of you keeping track, making sure they knew what you sacrificed, hoping they would reciprocate? Did you give with an open hand or with strings attached? We're not terrible people for having mixed motives. We're human. But recognizing the difference between conditional giving and true generosity can transform our relationships and our inner peace. When we give with strings attached, we end up disappointed. People don't thank us enough. They don't reciprocate the way we hoped. They don't even seem to notice. And we feel resentful, used, unappreciated. But when we give freely, really freely, there's no setup for disappointment. We give because we want to, because we can, because the giving itself is the gift, not the response to it. There's a joy in that kind of giving that nothing else quite matches. The king's gift moved heaven because it was pure. No self-interest, no calculation, no hidden expectation, just love in action, just compassion overflowing, just the recognition that his life was not more important than the lives of his people. You don't have to give your life, but you can give with that same quality of heart. You can give your time to someone without watching the clock, without tallying how much they owe you. You can give your attention to a friend without multitasking, without checking your phone, without waiting for your turn to talk. You can give kindness to the person who forgot to thank you last time, because your kindness isn't dependent on their gratitude. This kind of giving actually fills you up instead of depleting you. It creates space in your heart instead of building resentment. It connects you to others instead of keeping score between you. The king didn't wait to give until he felt like it, until he was sure it would be appreciated, until he had received enough himself. He gave because his heart was open. He gave because giving was his nature. And that's available to you too. Not as a sacrifice, not as something you have to force yourself to do, but as a natural expression of who you are beneath all the calculating and protecting. Rest now in the possibility of generosity, not as a burden, not as another thing you should do, but as a door that opens into something freer, something lighter, something more connected to what matters most. Let your heart soften. Let the strings of transaction loosen. You don't owe anyone anything tonight, and no one owes you anything either. Just rest. Just breathe. The gift of this moment is enough. This is enough. You are enough. Everything is already here, already given, already received. Just rest in that. Let sleep come gently, like rain after a long drought. The wealthy yet empty merchant. In the bustling city of Benares, there lived a merchant named Ananda, whose wealth was known throughout the land. His warehouse stretched the length of 3 city blocks, filled with silks from China, spices from the southern islands, precious gems from mountain mines, carved ivory from distant kingdoms. His home stood 3 stories high with marble floors that stayed cool even in summer heat, with fountains in every courtyard, with servants to attend his every need. Yet Ananda could not sleep at night. He lay in his silk-covered bed, staring at painted ceilings, feeling an emptiness that no amount of gold could fill. During the day, he moved through his business with mechanical efficiency, negotiating deals, counting profits, expanding his empire. But inside, he felt hollow. Nothing satisfied him. No purchase brought lasting joy. No success filled the void. He began to collect more. Art from famous painters, rare books bound in leather, musical instruments he didn't know how to play. He bought a second home, then a third. He threw lavish parties, hoping the laughter and music would fill the silence inside him. But when the guests left and the servants cleaned up the mess, the emptiness remained, darker than before. One evening, exhausted by another day of acquisition that brought no peace, Ananda wandered the streets of the city alone. He walked without purpose, his fine robes attracting stares from street vendors and beggars. He found himself in a poor quarter he'd never visited before, where the streets were narrow and the houses pressed together like teeth. There, sitting outside a small temple, was an old monk with a begging bowl. The monk's robe was patched and faded. His bowl contained only a few grains of rice, but his face held something Ananda hadn't seen in years. Peace. Actual peace. Not the forced smile of someone pretending. Not the busy distraction of someone avoiding. Just calm, clear, settled peace. Ananda approached. "Teacher," he said, surprising himself with the title. "I am a wealthy man. I have everything a person could want. Yet I am miserable. You have nothing. Yet you seem content. What do you possess that I lack?" The monk looked up at him with eyes that seemed to see everything. "Sit," he said simply, gesturing to the ground beside him. Ananda, who hadn't sat on bare ground since he was a child, hesitated. Then he sat, his expensive robes dragging in the dust. "Tell me," the monk said, "what do you have?" Ananda began listing his possessions, his warehouses, his homes, his ships that traveled distant seas, his investments, his gold, his collections. The list went on and on. The monk listened without expression. When Ananda finally finished, the monk asked, "And what do you lack?" "Peace," Ananda said immediately. "Joy, purpose, meaning, connection, the feeling that my life matters, the ability to be still without being consumed by emptiness." The monk nodded slowly. "You own many things," he said, "but you do not possess yourself. You have filled your life with objects, with activities, with distractions, because you cannot bear to be alone with who you are. You are a stranger to your own heart." The words landed like stones in water, creating ripples that spread through Ananda's entire being. "The emptiness you feel," the monk continued, "is not a problem to be solved by adding more. It is not a hole to be filled with possessions or achievements or experiences. It is your own inner life calling to you, asking you to finally come home to yourself." Ananda felt tears rising, surprising him. "But I don't know how," he whispered. "I've spent my entire life building, acquiring, achieving. I don't know how to just be." "That," the monk said gently, "is why you're empty. You've been so busy doing that you've forgotten how to be. You've been so focused on having that you've lost touch with who you are beneath all the having." The monk reached into his bowl and pulled out a single grain of rice. "I have this," he said. "One grain. But I also have something you've lost. I have myself. I know who I am when everything is stripped away. I've sat with my own mind long enough to meet myself truly. And in that meeting, I found what you're seeking. Not out there in the world, but in here. He touched his chest. Ananda sat beside the monk as the evening deepened into night, as the stars emerged overhead, as the city sounds softened into quiet. And for the first time in decades, he was still, not doing anything, not planning anything, not acquiring anything, just sitting with the emptiness he'd been running from his entire life. And in that stillness, something shifted. The emptiness didn't disappear, but it changed. It stopped being a problem and became a space where he could finally breathe, a space where he could finally feel, a space where, perhaps, he could finally come home to himself. This story speaks to so many of us living in a culture that promises fulfillment through acquisition. We're told constantly that we need more success, more money, more experiences, more self-improvement, more productivity, more achievement. We're told that happiness is just one more purchase away, one more promotion away, one more relationship away. And so we acquire, we add, we accumulate. We fill our homes with things we don't need, our schedules with activities that don't nourish us, our minds with information that doesn't lead to wisdom. We're so busy doing, having, achieving, that we never stop long enough to ask why none of it actually satisfies. The emptiness Ananda felt is not unique to him. It's epidemic in our modern world. We call it depression, anxiety, existential crisis, burnout. We medicate it, therapy it, distract from it, analyze it. But rarely do we simply sit with it and let it speak to us about what we're actually missing. Because what we're missing isn't more stuff. It's not a better job or a different relationship or a bigger house or more followers on social media. What we're missing is ourselves, our own presence, our own attention turned inward, the willingness to be alone with who we are beneath all the roles we play and all the things we've accumulated. Think about the last time you were truly still, not scrolling on your phone, not watching something, not listening to something, not planning or worrying or replaying conversations. Just still, just present with yourself. How long has it been? For some of us, it's been years. We've been running from our own company for so long we've forgotten what it feels like to just be. And the irony is that the peace we're seeking through all our doing and having and achieving is only available in the stillness we're avoiding. It's only found when we stop running and turn to face the emptiness directly. When we finally ask it, "What are you? What are you trying to tell me?" The emptiness is not your enemy. It's not a sign that something's wrong with you or that you've failed at life. It's an invitation. It's your inner life calling you home. It's asking you to finally put down the acquisitions and the achievements and the constant doing, and just be with yourself. To meet yourself truly, perhaps for the first time. You don't need more to be whole. You don't need to add anything to be complete. You don't need to become anything other than what you already are. You just need to stop long enough to notice what's already here. To feel what you've been avoiding, to be present to your own life instead of constantly trying to escape it through acquisition and distraction. The monk with his single grain of rice had everything that matters. Not because he'd achieved some spiritual state that you haven't, but because he'd stopped running. He'd made peace with his own company. He'd come home to himself. And that homecoming is available to you too. Not by adding more, but by being willing to sit with the emptiness, to let it teach you, to discover that it's not actually empty at all. It's full of everything you've been seeking elsewhere. Full of peace, presence, your own true nature waiting patiently for you to finally arrive. Rest now in this possibility. You don't have to figure out how to be yourself. You don't have to learn some technique or acquire some knowledge. You just have to stop long enough to notice you're already here. Already whole. Already enough. Exactly as you are. Without adding a single thing. Let your breath slow. Let your mind settle. Let yourself be held by this moment, which asks nothing of you except your presence. The emptiness you fear is actually fullness you haven't noticed yet. Be still enough to feel it. The richest beggar. One morning, the Buddha was walking through the streets of Rajagaha with his bowl, collecting alms as monks do. The city was coming alive with the day's activity. Shopkeepers opening their stalls, women carrying water from the well, children running between the houses, the smell of cooking fires mixing with jasmine that grew over garden walls. A beggar sat at the corner of two streets, his bowl empty, his clothes ragged, his body thin from years of hunger. His name was Sumantra, and he had been begging in this same spot for as long as anyone could remember. The merchants threw him copper coins occasionally. The housewives gave him leftover rice. He survived, barely, dependent on the charity of those who passed. When Sumantra saw the Buddha approaching, something stirred in his heart. He had heard stories of this teacher. They said he had given up a kingdom to seek truth. They said his words could free people from suffering. Sumantra felt a deep longing rise in him. He wanted to offer something to this holy man. But what did he have? Nothing. He was the poorest man in the city. Still, the feeling was so strong. As the Buddha came closer, Sumantra looked desperately around. There, beside his sleeping mat, was a half-rotten mango someone had thrown away the day before. It was bruised and soft, hardly fit to eat. But it was all he had. With trembling hands, Sumantra picked up the mango and held it out to the Buddha. "Teacher," he said, his voice cracking with emotion, "I have nothing. But please, accept this. It's all I can offer." The Buddha stopped and looked at Sumantra with such kindness that the beggar felt tears spring to his eyes. The Buddha accepted the mango, holding it carefully in both hands as if it were the most precious gift he'd ever received. "Thank you," the Buddha said. Then he sat down beside Sumantra, there in the dust of the street. "You call yourself poor," the Buddha said gently. "But let me tell you what you actually possess." Sumantra looked confused. He possessed nothing. That was obvious to everyone. "You have 2 eyes," the Buddha continued. "Do you know how precious that is? You can see the sunrise paint the sky gold each morning. You can see the faces of those you love. You can read stories, watch children play, notice the first blossoms of spring. There are those who would give all the gold in the kingdom for what you have in those 2 eyes." Sumantra touched his face, as if feeling his eyes for the first time. "You have 2 ears," the Buddha went on. "You can hear music, birdsong, rain falling on leaves, the laughter of friends, words of wisdom. You can hear the whole symphony of the world. Many would trade their fortunes for your ears. The Buddha gestured to Sumantra's hands. You have these hands that can touch, can feel, can create. You have legs that can carry you anywhere you wish to walk. You have a tongue that can taste food, speak truth, offer words of comfort. Sumantra was beginning to understand, his eyes widening. You have a mind, the Buddha said, touching his own head, capable of thought, of learning, of understanding the deepest truths of existence. You have a heart capable of love, compassion, connection. You have this breath moving in and out of you, moment after moment, keeping you alive without you having to do anything at all. The Buddha looked directly into Sumantra's eyes. You have the gift of consciousness itself. You are aware. You are alive. You exist in this vast universe as a being capable of experiencing it all. Do you know how rare that is? How precious. Tears were streaming down Sumantra's face now. His whole life he'd thought of himself as poor, as lacking, as having nothing. But the Buddha was showing him the truth. He was rich beyond measure. He just never noticed. The wealthy merchant who passes you every day, the Buddha continued. He has gold and silk and houses. But if he lost his sight, he would give everything he owns to have your eyes. If he lost his health, he would trade his entire fortune to have your ability to walk, to breathe easily, to be free from pain. Sumantra looked down at his hands, his broken bowl, his ragged clothes. They looked different now. Everything looked different. You are not poor, the Buddha said softly. You are one of the richest people alive. You just hadn't counted your true wealth. And because you hadn't counted it, you couldn't feel grateful for it. And without gratitude, even the richest person feels empty. From that day forward, Sumantra still begged for his food. His circumstances didn't magically change, but something inside him transformed completely. He would sit at his corner and feel the morning sun on his face, marveling at the gift of sensation. He would watch people pass and feel grateful for his sight. He would hear the market sounds and recognize the treasure of his hearing. He became known throughout the city, not as the poor beggar, but as the man who smiled no matter what, whose face shone with a quiet joy that wealth could never buy. This teaching hits differently when we really take it in. We spend so much of our lives focused on what we don't have. We compare ourselves to others and see only what they have that we lack. Better job, nicer home, more money, better looks, easier life. We catalogue our deficiencies. We marinate in our sense of lack. And because we're so focused on what's missing, we completely overlook what's here. The extraordinary gifts we possess every single day. Things so fundamental we've stopped noticing them. Things so precious that people would give everything to have them. Right now, you can see these words. That's a miracle. Your eyes are taking in light, and your brain is translating it into meaning, and you're understanding concepts transmitted from one consciousness to another through symbols on a screen. People spend fortunes on devices and connections, but the real miracle is your capacity to perceive it all. Right now, you can hear. If there are sounds around you, your ears are catching vibrations in the air and your mind is interpreting them. You can hear music that moves your soul, voices of people you love, the sound of rain that comforts you. This is wealth beyond measure. Right now, you're breathing breath moving in and out without you having to think about it, without you having to control it, your body knowing exactly what to do to keep you alive. Oxygen feeding every cell, your heart beating its steady rhythm, your body maintaining its temperature, healing your wounds, digesting your food, all of it happening automatically, miraculously. When was the last time you felt genuinely grateful for your breath, for your heartbeat, for your sight, your hearing, your ability to move? For most of us, it's been so long we can't remember. We only notice these things when they're threatened or taken away. We only count them as wealth when we're at risk of losing them. But imagine if you woke up tomorrow and your sight was gone. How much would you give to see one more sunrise? To see the face of someone you love one more time? You'd give everything, wouldn't you? But right now, today, you have that. You have it for free. And you're probably not even appreciating it because you're too busy thinking about what you don't have. This is the tragedy of our lack-focused mindset. We're standing in the middle of tremendous wealth, feeling poor. We're surrounded by gifts, feeling deprived. We have access to miracles every moment, and we're blind to them because we're comparing ourselves to others, measuring ourselves against impossible standards, focusing on the one thing we lack instead of the 1,000 things we have. Gratitude isn't just a nice spiritual practice. It's a way of accurately perceiving reality. It's counting your actual wealth instead of your imagined poverty. And when you start counting truthfully, you realize you're rich. Astonishingly rich. Unbelievably fortunate. Not because your circumstances are perfect, but because you're alive and aware and capable of experiencing this extraordinary existence. Tonight, do what Sumatra did. Take inventory of your real wealth. Your eyes, your ears, your hands, your breath, your mind, your capacity to love, your ability to learn, your consciousness itself, which is the most precious thing in the universe. You don't need to acquire anything else to be rich. You don't need to achieve anything more to be worthy. You don't need to become anyone different to deserve joy. You already have treasure beyond measure. You just need to notice it, to count it, to let yourself feel the staggering gratitude of being alive, right here, right now, with all these gifts that you did nothing to earn but received anyway. Rest in this awareness. You are rich. You are blessed. You are walking around with priceless treasures you've been taking for granted. Let yourself feel it. Let gratitude settle into your bones. Let appreciation flood through you like light through a window. This is the real wealth. This is what actually matters. Not what you lack, but what you have. Not what's missing, but what's here. Not what you might get someday, but what you already possess this very moment. The 6 blind men and the elephant. In the kingdom of Rajasthan, there lived 6 blind men who had been friends since childhood. They lived together in a small house at the edge of the village, supporting each other, sharing their lives, navigating the world through sound and touch and smell. One day, word came to the village that a traveling caravan had arrived, bringing exotic animals from distant lands. The villagers were excited, speaking of creatures they had never seen before. The 6 blind men, hearing all the commotion, decided they wanted to experience these marvels too, even if they couldn't see them. They made their way to where the caravan had stopped, their walking sticks tapping the ground before them. The caravanner, seeing them approach, felt compassion for these men who couldn't witness his animals with their eyes. "Would you like to touch the elephant?" he asked. "It's the most magnificent creature I have." The 6 men agreed eagerly. They had heard of elephants, but had never encountered one. The caravanner led them to where the great beast stood, patient and still, its breath moving like wind. The first man reached out, and his hands found the elephant's side, broad and rough like a wall. He ran his palms across the vast expanse of warm skin. "Ah," he exclaimed, "an elephant is like a wall, enormous and flat and solid." The second man had been led to the elephant's tusk. His fingers traced the smooth, hard curve of ivory, tapering to a point. "No, no," he said confidently. "An elephant is like a spear, long and sharp and smooth." The third man found the trunk. It moved in his hands, flexible and strong, like a thick snake. He felt it curl and uncurl, felt the breath from the nostrils. "You're both wrong," he declared. "An elephant is like a snake, long and flexible and breathing." The fourth man touched the leg. His arms couldn't reach around its circumference. The skin was rough and the leg was solid as a tree trunk, planted firmly on the ground. "An elephant is like a tree," he announced. "Round and rough and tall and steady." The fifth man had grasped the ear. It was thin and wide, moving slightly in the breeze, textured like leather. "You're all mistaken," he said. "An elephant is like a fan, thin and wide and flexible." The sixth man had hold of the tail, which swished back and forth. He felt the coarse hairs, the rope-like texture. "An elephant is like a rope," he insisted, "thick and strong and hairy." As they walked home together, they began to argue. Each man was absolutely certain of his assessment. Each insisted the others were wrong. The argument grew heated. Voices rose. Old friendships strained under the weight of their contradictory certainties. "It's a wall." "No, a spear." "You're both fools." "It's clearly a snake." "Have you lost your minds?" "It's a tree." "It's a fan." "It's a rope." A wise woman who lived in the village heard their arguing and approached them. "Tell me," she said gently, "what you're fighting about." They explained, each giving his version of what an elephant was, each insisting his perception was the truth and the others were wrong. The wise woman smiled. "You are all correct," she said, "and you are all wrong. Each of you touched a different part of the elephant. Each of you perceived a truth, but each of you mistook your partial truth for the whole truth. The elephant is all of these things. It has a side like a wall, tusks like spears, a trunk like a snake, legs like trees, ears like fans, and a tail like a rope. The complete truth includes all of your experiences, not just one." The 6 men fell silent, understanding washing over them. In their blindness, they had each grasped a piece of reality. But their mistake was not in their perception. It was in their certainty that their piece was the whole. This ancient parable speaks directly to one of the greatest sources of conflict in our world. We each see only a part of reality, yet we're absolutely convinced our part is the complete picture. We defend our perspective with certainty. We argue with anyone who sees differently. We create enemies out of people who simply touched a different part of the elephant. Think about political arguments. Each side is touching a different part of the elephant of reality. Each has perceived something true. But instead of being curious about what the other side experienced, instead of asking what part of the elephant did you touch that I haven't, we insist the other side is completely wrong, deluded, stupid, or malicious. We build our identities around our partial perceptions and go to war over them. Or think about relationships. You and your partner argue about something that happened. You remember it one way. They remember it completely differently. Both of you are certain you're right. You each touched a different part of the elephant. You each perceived something true about the experience. But you're fighting over whose version is the whole truth when neither of you has the complete picture. Or think about how we judge others. We see someone's behavior and we're absolutely certain we know why they did what they did, what kind of person they are. But we're seeing only the tiniest slice of their reality. We're touching one part of an enormous, complex elephant and declaring we understand the whole creature. The tragedy is how much conflict, how much division, how much suffering comes from this mistake. Not from being wrong about what we perceived, but from being certain that our perception is complete. From our inability to hold space for the possibility that we're seeing part of the truth, not all of it. What if you approached disagreements differently? What if, instead of defending your view and attacking theirs, you got curious? You're seeing it like a rope. Interesting. I'm seeing it like a wall. I wonder what that means about where we're each standing. I wonder what the complete truth looks like that includes both our perspectives. This doesn't mean all perspectives are equally valid or that there's no such thing as truth. It means recognizing that your view is always partial, always limited by where you're standing, what you've experienced, what you're paying attention to, what you're capable of seeing from your particular vantage point. The 6 blind men would have served themselves and their friendship much better by pooling their experiences. I felt something like a wall. I felt something like a spear. Let's put all our perceptions together and see if we can understand the whole creature. Instead, they each clung to their certainty and nearly destroyed their connection. How many of your relationships are strained by this same pattern? How many arguments could be resolved if both people said, I'm touching part of the elephant? You're touching part of the elephant. Let's be curious about the whole truth instead of fighting over our partial truths. This takes tremendous humility. It requires releasing your grip on certainty. It asks you to hold your views more lightly, to stay open to learning, to maintain curiosity even in the face of strong disagreement. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's recognizing the limitation of any single perspective, including your own. Tonight, consider the elephants in your life. The complex realities you've reduced to simple certainties. The people you've judged based on partial information. The arguments you're having where you're absolutely convinced you're right and they're wrong. What if you're both touching different parts of the truth? What if the real wisdom is in holding space for perspectives different from yours? Staying curious, resisting the temptation to make your experience the only valid experience. This is how we move toward peace. Not by everyone seeing things exactly the same way, but by everyone recognizing that our view is always partial, always incomplete, always in need of other perspectives to approach something closer to the whole truth. Let this awareness settle into you. You don't know everything. You can't see everything. Your perception, however real it feels to you, is just one angle on a reality far more complex than you can grasp from your particular vantage point. and that's okay. That's not a failing. That's just the nature of being human. We're all blind men touching parts of elephants, doing our best to understand. May we do it with more humility, more curiosity, more kindness toward those who touch different parts than we do. The tattered robe. In a village at the foot of the Himalayas, there lived a weaver named Chetna. Her hands were rough from years of working the loom, her back bent from the constant forward lean of her craft. She was poor, barely making enough from selling cloth to feed herself and her daughter. But her heart was vast, and she paid close attention to the teachings of the wandering monks who sometimes passed through the village. One season, Chetna heard that the Buddha himself would be passing through on his way to teach in the nearby town. The news filled her with joy and longing. She wanted desperately to offer something to him, to express her gratitude for teachings that had brought her so much peace despite her poverty. But what could she give? She had no money, no food to spare. The Buddha needed a new robe. She had heard. His had grown thin and ragged from years of travel, but she had no fine cloth. She had only one piece of fabric in her home, a simple cotton weave she had made for herself, meant to be her only good robe. It was all she had. She worked through the night, her oil lamp burning low, cutting and sewing the fabric into a monk's robe. Her hands ached. Her eyes burned. But she poured all her love, all her devotion, all her gratitude into every stitch. When dawn came, the robe was finished. It was simple, plain, with small imperfections from her tired hands. But it was clean and whole and made with complete sincerity. When the Buddha arrived, many people came to greet him. Wealthy merchants brought fine foods. Nobles brought silk and gold. Scholars brought rare texts. Chetna stood at the back of the crowd, clutching her simple cotton robe, suddenly ashamed. Her offering seemed so small, so poor compared to the magnificent gifts being presented. She almost turned to leave. But then she remembered the teaching. The gift matters less than the heart that offers it. So she stepped forward, her head bowed, and held out the robe. "Blessed teacher," she said quietly, "I have nothing of value, but I made this for you. It's all I have." The Buddha looked at Chetna, and then at the robe in her hands. He could see the uneven stitches, the simple cloth, the worn fingers that had sewn it. He could also see something else. He could see that this woman had given him everything. Not her excess, not her leftovers. Everything. He accepted the robe with both hands, holding it as carefully as if it were made of gold. "This," he said to the crowd, "is the most precious gift I have received. Not because of its material value, but because of the sacrifice behind it. This woman has given me her only robe. She has kept nothing back. Her gift comes from a place of complete generosity, asking nothing in return." He turned to Chetna, whose eyes were filled with tears. "The silk robes and gold are given from surplus. They cost their givers nothing they will miss. But you have given from scarcity. You have given what you needed. This is true generosity. This is what opens the heart." The Buddha wore Chetna's robe for the rest of that season, and the story of her gift traveled farther than any silk, taught more than any gold. This story reveals something profound about the nature of giving. We often measure gifts by their material value. We compare dollar amounts. We judge whether something is expensive enough, impressive enough, good enough. But that's not how gifts actually work at the level of the heart. A gift's true value is measured by what it costs the giver, not by what it's worth to anyone else. The wealthy merchant's gold cost him nothing. He had so much he wouldn't miss it. The scholar's rare texts came from their overflowing libraries. Giving them away required no sacrifice. But Chetna gave everything. That plain cotton robe was all she had. Giving it meant she would be without. Her gift required something of her. It came from a place of real sacrifice, real love, real devotion. Think about the gifts you give. Are you giving from surplus or from scarcity? Are you giving what costs you nothing, what you won't miss, what's easy to part with? Or are you giving something that requires you to let go, that leaves you a little less protected, a little more vulnerable? This isn't about financial sacrifice. It's about the quality of giving. You could give someone your time when you actually need rest. That's giving from scarcity. You could give someone your attention when you're exhausted and would rather check out. That's giving from scarcity. You could forgive when you're still hurt. That's giving from scarcity. These gifts have a different quality. They come from a deeper place. They change you in the giving. They open your heart wider. They crack through the protective layers you've built. They connect you to something beyond yourself. Or think about it from the receiving end. What gifts have moved you most in your life? Probably not the most expensive ones. Probably the ones where you could feel the giver's heart, where you knew they thought of you specifically, where the gift revealed something about how much you mattered to them. Maybe it was a handmade card from your child, crooked letters and uneven coloring, but you could see the concentration and love that went into every line. Maybe it was someone showing up for you when they were going through their own crisis, giving you their presence even when they had little to give. Maybe it was someone speaking up for you when it was socially risky, giving you their loyalty when it cost them something. These gifts have power because they come from that place of sacrifice. They're not transactions. They're not performative. They're authentic expressions of love or care or devotion, and that authenticity is what makes them precious. The world tells us to give from our excess. Give what you won't miss. Give what's easy. Give what makes you look good. But that kind of giving doesn't transform anyone. It doesn't touch the heart of the receiver, and it doesn't open the heart of the giver. Real giving, the kind that matters, the kind that changes things, comes from a different place. It comes from willingness to be affected by your own generosity, willingness to give what costs you something, willingness to love even when love requires you to stretch, to sacrifice, to let go of something you wanted to keep. Chetna kept nothing back. She didn't calculate. She didn't give half and save half. She didn't protect herself. She gave completely. And in that complete giving, she touched something holy. You don't have to give away everything you own, but you can give from that place inside you that doesn't calculate, doesn't protect, doesn't measure and compare. You can give your attention without dividing it, your presence without checking your phone, your forgiveness without conditions, your love without guarantees it will be returned. That kind of giving transforms you. It makes you bigger. It opens doors in your heart you didn't know were closed. It connects you to others and to something beyond yourself. Rest now with this knowing. You don't have to perform generosity. You don't have to give what you don't have. But when you do give, Let it come from that deep place. Let it cost you something. Let it be real. That's where the magic is. That's what actually matters. Let your giving be like Chetna's robe. Simple maybe. Imperfect maybe. But complete. Sincere. From the heart. The golden fish set free. In a coastal village in southern China, there lived a fisherman named Liu who spent his days casting nets into the sea. His life was simple. He caught fish, sold them at the market, earned enough to feed his family. He asked for nothing more. One morning, Liu pulled up his net, and among the silver fish flopping and gasping, there was one fish that shone like the sun itself. Its scales were pure gold. Its eyes were jewels. Liu had never seen anything like it. His hands trembled as he carefully untangled it from his net. The fish looked at him with an intelligence that seemed almost human. It didn't flop or struggle. It simply watched him, its golden body gleaming in the morning light. Liu's mind raced. This fish was worth a fortune. He could sell it to a wealthy collector, to the emperor himself. He could buy land, build a proper house, ensure his children never knew hunger or hardship. His family's entire future had just swum into his net. He held the fish carefully in both hands. Its gills moved slowly. It was dying. In minutes, it would be gone. He needed to decide quickly. But something stopped him. He looked into those eyes and saw something there. Awareness. Life. A creature as desperate to live as he was. A being that wanted to return to the deep water, to swim in the currents, to exist under the open sky. And he realized he was holding someone's whole life in his hands. Not just an object of value. Not just a means to wealth, but a living being whose existence mattered to itself as much as his existence mattered to him. His wife would be angry. His children would not understand. The other fishermen would call him a fool. But in that moment, standing on the shore with the golden fish in his hands, Liu knew what he had to do. He waded into the water until it reached his knees. Then he opened his hands and let the fish go. For a moment, it seemed stunned, floating motionless. Then, with a powerful flick of its tail, it dove down into the clear water. Liu watched it swim away, a flash of gold disappearing into the blue depths. He stood there for a long time, water lapping at his legs, feeling something he'd never felt before. Not regret, not loss, but a kind of joy that had nothing to do with gain. A lightness in his chest, a sense that he'd done something right, something good, something that made him more human rather than less. He went home with an empty basket that day. His wife asked where the fish were. "I caught only one," he said, "and I let it go." She stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. "You let it go? Why would you do that?" "Because," he said, slowly, finding the words as he spoke them, "I felt richer letting it go than I would have felt selling it. I felt wealthier in my heart than any gold could make me." That night, Liu lay on his simple sleeping mat, his belly not particularly full, his home not any finer than it had been that morning. But inside, he felt like the richest man in the world. He had possessed something precious, and he had chosen to set it free. Not because he had to, not because anyone was watching, but because letting go felt more true, more aligned with who he wanted to be, than holding on. This story touches something subtle but profound about the nature of wealth and freedom. We think wealth comes from accumulation, from getting and keeping, from holding tight to everything valuable that comes our way. But sometimes real wealth, the kind that actually makes you feel rich inside, comes from letting go. Liu could have sold that fish. He could have been financially secure. No one would have blamed him. Keeping it would have been the practical choice, the reasonable choice, the choice most people would make. But it would have cost him something. Not money. Something deeper. It would have cost him his sense of integrity, his connection to his own compassion, his ability to look at himself and feel good about who he was. Think about times you've held on to things you knew you should let go of. Maybe it was money someone owed you. You were technically right to keep pursuing it. But the pursuit made you feel small, petty, consumed by resentment. Maybe letting go would have cost you money but gained you peace. Or maybe it was a grudge. Someone hurt you, and you were justified in your anger. But carrying that anger year after year, nursing it, feeding it, letting it color everything, that's costing you something too. What would it feel like to just let it go? Not because they deserve forgiveness, not because what they did was okay, but because holding on to it is making you poor in spirit, and letting go might make you rich. Or maybe it's something you want desperately. A relationship that's not meant to be. A career path that's making you miserable. A dream that's no longer aligned with who you've become. You keep grasping at it because you've invested so much. Because giving up feels like failure. Because you don't know who you'd be without this wanting. But what if letting go is actually the path to wealth? What if the relief, the freedom, the spaciousness that comes from releasing your grip on what you can't have or shouldn't have is worth more than finally getting it would be? Liu's story suggests that there's a kind of richness that comes specifically from voluntary release. Not from loss forced on you, not from having things taken away, but from consciously choosing to open your hands and let something precious go free. This touches on something paradoxical. We think security comes from holding tight. But holding tight makes us tense, anxious, afraid of loss. We think happiness comes from getting what we want. But then we're trapped in protecting it, worried about losing it, never really free to enjoy it. Sometimes the greatest wealth is in wanting nothing, in being so free from grasping that you can hold even precious things lightly, in being so secure in your own worth that you don't need to possess or accumulate or prove anything. Liu went home empty-handed but full-hearted. He had nothing to show for his day of work, but he had something better than gold. He had the experience of acting from his higher self. He had the memory of choosing compassion over greed. He had the felt sense of being the kind of person who values life over profit. Can money buy that? Can possessions give you that? Can any amount of accumulation create that kind of inner richness? Tonight, consider what you might be richer for releasing. What are you holding on to that's making you feel poor? What grip could you loosen that would actually make you feel more free? What could you let go of that would allow you to respect yourself more deeply? This isn't about giving away things you need. It's not about being foolish with resources. It's about recognizing that sometimes the cost of holding on is greater than the cost of letting go. Sometimes what you're clutching is clutching you back, keeping you trapped, making you less free than you could be. The golden fish swam away into freedom, and in freeing it, Liu freed himself. He freed himself from the prison of endless wanting. He freed himself from measuring his worth by what he possessed. He freed himself to be guided by compassion rather than calculation. That's the real treasure. Not what you have, but who you become. Not what you keep, but what you're willing to release. Not how much you accumulate, but how freely you can live. Rest in this truth. Let your hands open. Let your grip loosen. Feel the relief, the space, the possibility that comes when you stop holding so tight. The golden fish swims free. And so can you. Angulimala, the transformed. In the time of the Buddha, there lived a young man named Angulimala, whose name meant garland of fingers. He had earned this terrible name through terrible deeds. He was a serial killer, a murderer who wore a necklace of the fingers of his victims. He lived in a forest that everyone avoided, and his name struck terror into the hearts of all who heard it. But Angulimala had not always been a monster. He had once been a promising student, intelligent and devoted to his teacher. But his teacher, jealous of the young man's abilities, had given him an impossible task as a cruel joke: kill 1,000 people and bring me their fingers, and you will achieve enlightenment. Angulimala, in his innocence and devotion, believed him. He took the instruction literally, and so he began his terrible work, descending into darkness, killing travelers in the forest, adding finger after finger to the grim necklace around his neck. 999 fingers. One more to go. His mother, hearing that her son had become a murderer, went into the forest to try to save him. She would be his 1,000th victim. But the Buddha, knowing this, entered the forest himself to intervene. Angulimala saw the Buddha walking calmly through the trees. An easy target. The final finger he needed. He raised his sword and began to chase the Buddha, running at full speed. But something strange happened. No matter how fast Angulimala ran, he could not catch up to the Buddha, who appeared to be walking slowly, peacefully, as if on a casual stroll. Angulimala ran until his lungs burned, until his legs screamed, until he finally collapsed, gasping. "Stop," he cried out. "Stop walking." The Buddha turned and looked at him calmly. "I have stopped," he said. "It is you who have not stopped." Angulimala, confused and exhausted, asked, "What do you mean?" "You're the one walking." "I'm the one who stopped." "I have stopped killing," the Buddha said quietly. "I have stopped causing harm. I have stopped running from truth. You are the one still running, still killing, still trapped in your own suffering." Something in these words penetrated through all of Angulimala's conditioning, all his justifications, all the hardness he'd built around himself. He saw suddenly what he had become. The horror of it crashed over him like a wave. He fell to his knees, the sword dropping from his hands, and wept. "What have I done?" he cried. "How can I ever be forgiven? I've killed hundreds of people. I'm beyond redemption. I'm a monster." The Buddha sat down beside him in the dirt. "You have done terrible things," he said. "There is no denying that. But you are not your actions. The person who did those things is not the person you have to continue being. Right now, in this moment, you can stop. You can turn toward truth. You can begin again." Angulimala looked up, tears streaming down his face. How can someone like me change? How can I live with what I've done? By stopping, the Buddha said simply, by letting the past be past, by choosing differently right now, by walking a different path from this moment forward. Angulimala removed the gruesome necklace from his neck. He buried it in the ground, and he followed the Buddha out of the forest, leaving his old life behind like a discarded skin. He became a monk. The transformation was not easy. People recognized him. They threw stones. They screamed curses. They would not forgive him for what he had done. But Angulimala accepted their anger without defending himself. He had been a monster. Their rage was justified. Yet slowly, through his practice, through his dedication, through his genuine transformation, Angulimala became known for his compassion. He devoted his life to helping others. He developed healing abilities. Women in difficult labor would call for him, and his presence would bring them ease. One day, encountering a woman in painful labor, Angulimala spoke words that became a famous blessing. Sister, since the day I was born in the noble birth, I do not recall intentionally depriving a living being of life. By this truth, may there be well-being for you. And it was true. Since his rebirth as a monk, since his transformation in the forest, he had not harmed another living being. He had been born anew, and that new birth was as real as his first. This story challenges our deepest assumptions about redemption and human nature. We want to believe that some people are simply bad, beyond saving, forever defined by their worst actions. It's easier that way. We can write them off, distance ourselves, feel superior. But Angulimala's story says something different. It says that transformation is always possible, that no one is beyond redemption, that the person you were yesterday doesn't have to be the person you are today, that you can stop, turn around, and walk a different direction no matter how far you've gone down the wrong path. Think about how you view yourself. Maybe you haven't killed anyone, but you've done things you're ashamed of. You've hurt people. You've made terrible choices. You've been someone you don't want to be. And maybe you carry that identity like Angulimala wore his necklace of fingers. I'm a bad person. I've done too much damage. I can't change. This is just who I am. But that's a story. It might be a story based on truth about your past, but it doesn't have to be the truth about your present or your future. You can stop. Right now. This moment. You can bury the old identity and walk out of your personal forest. Or think about how you view others. Maybe there's someone in your life, or someone in the news, who you've written off completely. They're a bad person. They don't deserve forgiveness. They should suffer for what they've done. And maybe they should face consequences. Maybe justice matters. But does that mean they're incapable of change? Does that mean they're forever defined by their worst moment? If Angulimala, with 999 murders behind him, could transform into a healer, what does that say about human capacity for change? What does that say about the rigidity of the identities we assign to ourselves and others? The Buddha didn't excuse what Angulimala had done. He didn't minimize the harm. He didn't say it was okay or that it didn't matter. But he also didn't say Angulimala was permanently defined by those actions. He offered a different possibility: stop and begin again. This is radical. It challenges everything our culture teaches about fixed identities and permanent damage, and people being fundamentally good or bad. It suggests that consciousness itself, awareness itself, has the power to completely redirect a life. That the moment you see clearly what you've been doing and choose to stop, you're already becoming someone new. Angulimala still faced consequences. People still hated him. The stones still flew. But inside, he was free. He had stopped. He had transformed. And that transformation was real, regardless of whether others recognized it or forgave him for his past. What do you need to stop? What old identity do you need to bury? What past version of yourself are you still carrying like a necklace of shame? What would it feel like to lay it down, to walk out of your forest, to let the Buddha of your own awareness show you that you can choose differently right now? You don't have to be who you were. The past happened. You can't change that. But this moment is new. This breath is new. The choice before you right now is new. You can stop the pattern. You can choose compassion instead of cruelty. You can choose truth instead of delusion. You can choose to become someone different, starting now. And if you can transform, then so can anyone. So can that person you've written off. So can that family member you've given up on. So can that public figure you're convinced is irredeemable. They might not choose to change, but the possibility exists. And holding space for that possibility, maintaining faith in human capacity for transformation, that's not naive. That's wise. That's honoring the deepest truth about consciousness itself. It can always wake up, turn around, and walk a new path. Rest now in this possibility. You are not your past. You are not your mistakes. You are not your worst moments. You are the awareness that can see those things, learn from them, and choose differently. And that awareness is fresh in every moment, capable of infinite renewal. The Buddha walked calmly through the forest. You can walk calmly through yours. The way out is through stopping, through seeing, through choosing, right now, to be someone different, someone kinder, someone more awake, someone who has laid down the heavy necklace and stepped into freedom, the stream that refused to flow. In a valley where rice paddies stretched like green mirrors reflecting the sky, there flowed a generous stream. It began high in the mountains, fed by glaciers and springs, and it wound its way down through the valley, giving its water freely to anyone who needed it. The farmers built channels to direct the stream's water to their fields. The water flowed willingly, nourishing the rice, making the valley abundant. Women came to wash clothes in its cool current, and the stream welcomed them. Children played in its shallows, and the stream carried them gently. Animals drank from its banks, and the stream offered itself without hesitation. For years, this continued. The stream gave and gave and gave. It was the stream's nature to flow, to give, to serve. It did so without thought of return, without expectation of gratitude. But slowly, the people of the valley began to take the stream for granted. They built their channels carelessly, wasting water. They threw garbage into the flow. They diverted more and more of the stream to their fields, leaving little for the stream's own journey to the sea. They fought with each other over the water, each wanting more than their neighbor. No one thanked the stream. No one honored it. No one noticed the generosity of its constant giving. One day, the stream stopped flowing. The villagers woke to find their channels dry. Their fields began to wither. Their animals had no water to drink. Panic spread through the valley. What had happened? Where had the stream gone? An old sage who lived in a cave above the valley came down to investigate. He sat beside the stream's bed, now just rocks and sand, and he listened. And he heard the stream speaking from somewhere deep beneath the earth. "Why should I flow?" the stream asked. "I have given everything for years, and no one appreciates it. They waste me, pollute me, fight over me. They don't respect what I offer. They don't honor my giving. So I have withdrawn. Let them learn what it means to live without me." The sage understood. He returned to the village and told the people what the stream had said. At first, they were angry. The stream has no right to withhold itself. It exists to serve us. It should flow whether we appreciate it or not. But as the days passed and the valley dried further, as their children grew thirsty and their crops died, they began to understand. They had treated the stream's generosity as an entitlement rather than a gift. They had taken without acknowledging. They had received without gratitude. The villagers gathered at the streambed. They cleaned the garbage from the rocks. They repaired their channels to waste less water. They agreed to share the water fairly. And they spoke to the stream, apologizing, expressing gratitude for all the years of its giving, promising to honor its generosity. The sage added, "But remember, the stream did not stop flowing to punish you. It stopped because when giving is met with carelessness and ingratitude, it depletes the giver. Even a stream, even the most generous heart, needs to be seen, honored, and used wisely." The stream's refusal to flow was not cruelty. It was self-preservation. Slowly, the stream began to flow again. First a trickle, then stronger, until it ran as it had before. But the people were different now. They did not take it for granted. Every morning, they paused to give thanks. They used the water carefully. They kept the stream clean. And in their gratitude, they found that the stream seemed to flow even more abundantly, as if generosity and appreciation created a cycle that enriched both giver and receiver. This story speaks to a pattern many of us know too well. We give and give, to family, to work, to friends, to causes we care about. We pour ourselves out generously, and for a while, it feels good. We're being useful, needed, important. But when our giving is met with endless taking, with carelessness, with lack of appreciation, something in us begins to dry up. We become resentful, bitter, exhausted, and we're confused because we thought giving was supposed to feel good, was supposed to be its own reward. Why are we so angry? The stream story shows us something important. Giving without reciprocity, without acknowledgement, without being met with care and respect, depletes us. And when we're depleted, we have nothing left to give. The stream didn't stop flowing because it became selfish. It stopped because it was being drained without being honored. And even the most generous source eventually runs dry. Think about your own life. Where are you, the stream? Where are you giving freely, perhaps too freely, to people or situations that don't respect what you're offering? Maybe it's a friendship where you always listen but never get listened to in return. Maybe it's a job where your extra efforts go unnoticed and unappreciated. Maybe it's a family pattern where you're expected to be endlessly available, endlessly generous, without your own needs ever being considered. You might feel guilty for even thinking about stopping. But I should give without expecting anything back. I should be selfless. I should keep flowing no matter what. But that's misunderstanding what the stream teaches. The stream stopped not to be vindictive, but to survive. There's wisdom in knowing when to withdraw, when to redirect your generosity toward those who will honor it. The villagers' mistake wasn't just that they didn't say thank you. It's that they treated the stream's giving as their right rather than as a gift. They demanded rather than requested. They wasted rather than cherished. They fought over rather than shared. When you're in a dynamic like that, when your generosity is being treated as an obligation rather than a gift, you have permission to stop flowing. Not out of spite, not as punishment, but as a recognition that giving without being met appropriately will eventually destroy your capacity to give at all. But here's the subtle part. True generosity doesn't give in order to receive. The stream didn't flow because it wanted thanks. It flowed because flowing was its nature. But even nature has its limits. Even the most generous heart needs to be met with some basic respect, some basic care, some acknowledgement that the giving matters. The villagers learned this when they faced the consequences of their taking. And importantly, when they changed their relationship to the stream, when they brought gratitude and care and respect, the stream flowed even more abundantly. This is the cycle that works. Generous giving met with grateful receiving, creating more capacity for both. So ask yourself, where do you need to stop flowing? Not forever necessarily. Not as a punishment, but as a way of teaching others that your generosity is a gift, not an entitlement, that you deserve to be met with care and respect, that you matter, not just for what you can provide, but for who you are. And also ask, where are you, the villagers? Where are you taking someone's generosity for granted? Your partner who always does the emotional labor, your friend who always makes time for you, your parent who always shows up, your colleague who always helps. What would happen if that stream stopped flowing? Would you even notice until you were thirsty? Bring gratitude to the streams in your life. Honor the giving you receive. Use it carefully. Don't waste it. Don't demand more than is freely offered. Meet generosity with appreciation. That's how the cycle sustains itself. That's how everyone stays abundant. Rest now knowing that your generosity is precious. It's not an obligation. It's not something anyone is entitled to. It's a gift. And you get to choose who receives it, how much, and under what conditions. The stream has every right to withdraw when it's not being honored. And so do you. Let yourself feel this permission. You can stop flowing to places that don't honor your giving. You can redirect your generosity toward those who receive it with care. You can protect your capacity to give by being wise about where you pour yourself out. And from that place of wise generosity, from that place of honored giving and grateful receiving, true abundance flows. Not the abundance of endless depletion, but the abundance of sustainable exchange, where everyone is enriched and no one runs dry. The poisoned arrow. In the time of the Buddha, a man named Malunkyaputta approached him with burning questions. Malunkyaputta was a devoted student, but he was troubled. He wanted answers to the big metaphysical questions. Is the universe eternal or not eternal? Is it finite or infinite? Does the soul exist after death? Is the self the same as the body or different from it? He went to the Buddha and said, "Teacher, you have not answered these questions. If you cannot tell me whether the universe is eternal, whether there is an afterlife, whether the soul exists separately from the body, then I will leave your teaching. These are the most important questions. I need to know the answers." The Buddha looked at him kindly and then told him a story. "Suppose," the Buddha said, "a man is shot with a poisoned arrow. The arrow lodges deep in his chest. The poison is working its way through his body. He will die soon if the arrow is not removed and the poison is not treated." Buddha nodded, listening intently. "Now suppose," the Buddha continued, "that this man's friends rush him to a surgeon who can remove the arrow and save his life. But the wounded man says, 'Wait. Before you remove the arrow, I need to know who shot it. Was he tall or short? Was he from the warrior caste or the farmer caste? What kind of bow did he use? What kind of wood was the arrow made from? Were the feathers from an eagle or a vulture? What was the man's name? Who were his parents?" The Buddha looked directly at Buddha. "While this man demands answers to all these questions, while he insists on knowing every detail about the arrow and the archer, what will happen to him? He will die," Buddha said quietly. "He will die while seeking answers to questions that don't help him." "Exactly," the Buddha said. "You are like that man. You have a poisoned arrow in your chest. You are suffering. You are experiencing the pain of existence, the anxiety of uncertainty, the dissatisfaction of life's impermanence. And I have the medicine. I have the teaching that can remove your suffering right now, in this life. But you're refusing the treatment because you want answers to questions that don't address your immediate pain." The Buddha continued, "Whether the universe is eternal or not, whether there is an afterlife or not, whether the soul exists separately or not, these questions do not affect your suffering right now. You will still experience pain, aging, loss, fear, and death, regardless of the answers. But the teaching I offer can end that suffering. It can remove the arrow. And that is what matters." Buddha sat in silence, understanding dawning on him. He had been so focused on abstract questions that he had missed the practical solution to his actual problems. He had been demanding cosmic answers when what he needed was healing in the present moment. "The questions you ask," the Buddha said gently, "are interesting to the mind. They give the mind something to chew on, something to debate. But they don't lead to peace. They don't end suffering. They don't bring you closer to freedom. They're distractions from the real work, which is removing the arrow that's poisoning your life right now." This teaching lands differently in our current moment. We live in an age of infinite information, infinite questions, infinite rabbit holes to go down. We can spend hours, days, years seeking answers to questions that, ultimately, don't change our lived experience. Think about how much mental energy you've spent on questions that don't actually help you. What happens after death? What's the meaning of life? Why does the universe exist? Is there a God? What's my purpose? These questions are fascinating. They're compelling. They keep our minds very busy. But have they brought you peace? Have they ended your suffering? Have they made your daily life easier to bear? Or think about smaller versions of the same pattern. Spending hours analyzing why someone hurt you, reconstructing every detail of what happened, trying to understand their motivations, getting lost in the story. Meanwhile, the wound is still there, bleeding, needing attention. The analysis doesn't heal it. The understanding doesn't make it stop hurting. You're refusing treatment while demanding to know every detail about the arrow. Or think about how we do this with our own minds. Something is making us anxious, and instead of addressing the anxiety directly, instead of learning to be with it and let it pass, we try to figure out exactly where it came from. What in our childhood caused this? What's the root? What's the original trauma? We turn our lives into archaeological digs, searching for the source of the arrow while it continues to poison us in the present. The Buddha isn't saying these questions are bad or wrong to ask. He's saying they're not the priority. The priority is the suffering that's happening right now. The priority is the treatment that works. The priority is removing the arrow before you die while still analyzing it. In our therapeutic culture, we've been taught that understanding is healing. That if we can just figure out why we are the way we are, if we can just trace everything back to its source, then we'll be free. And sometimes understanding helps. But sometimes it's another way of avoiding the actual work of healing. Another way of staying in our heads instead of being present with our pain. What's your poisoned arrow? Maybe it's anxiety that makes your chest tight every morning. Maybe it's depression that makes everything feel grey and hopeless. Maybe it's anger that burns through you regularly, damaging your relationships. Maybe it's loneliness that aches in your bones. Maybe it's addiction that's slowly destroying your life. And how have you been responding to that arrow? Have you been analyzing it endlessly? Reading books about why you're anxious, why you're depressed, why you're angry? Researching the psychological and neurological and spiritual causes, going over your history, your trauma, your family patterns, all while the arrow stays lodged in your chest, the poison still spreading. What if you just focused on removing it? What if you just did the things that actually work, regardless of whether you understand why they work? Meditation, therapy that focuses on present coping rather than endless excavation, movement, connection, service, being with your actual feelings instead of analyzing them. The teaching that removes suffering is available right now. It's not complicated. It's not hidden in ancient texts or secret teachings. It's be present, let go of grasping, develop compassion, see clearly. That's the medicine. That's what actually works. Everything else is interesting but ultimately beside the point. You don't need to know the meaning of life to have a good day today. You don't need to understand consciousness to be kind to your family. You don't need to resolve the question of free will to make a choice that improves your life. You don't need to know what happens after death to live well right now. The arrow is in your chest. The poison is working. The treatment is available. That's all you need to know. Everything else can wait. And honestly, once the arrow is removed, once you're actually at peace, those big questions might not seem so urgent anymore. They might not matter in the way they do when you're suffering and looking for any distraction from that suffering. Rest now in this simplicity. You don't have to figure everything out. You don't have to understand every mystery. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to accept the treatment that works. You just have to focus on removing the arrow instead of analyzing it. The Buddha's teaching is not a philosophical system to satisfy your curiosity. It's a medicine to end your suffering. Take the medicine. Let the questions rest. Let your mind's endless search for answers quiet down. The arrow comes out. The poison clears. The healing begins. That's what matters. That's what's real. That's what you actually need. Everything else is just the mind's way of staying busy while the suffering continues. Stop. Focus. Let the healing happen. Devadatta's jealousy. In the years after the Buddha's enlightenment, as his teaching spread and his following grew, there was one person whose heart burned with envy, his cousin Devadatta. They had grown up together, played together as children, trained together as young men. But where the Buddha had found enlightenment, Devadatta had found only bitterness. Devadatta was gifted in his own right. He was handsome, charismatic, intelligent. He had his own followers. He had his own accomplishments. But none of it was enough. He couldn't stop comparing himself to his cousin. Everywhere he went, people spoke of the Buddha, the Buddha's wisdom, the Buddha's compassion, the Buddha's enlightenment. And each word of praise for his cousin felt like a knife turning in Devadatta's chest. He tried to outshine the Buddha. He performed miracles, demonstrating psychic powers that awed the crowds. He gave impressive teachings. He cultivated relationships with royalty and wealthy patrons. But still, it wasn't enough. Still, people's eyes turned to the Buddha. Still, the comparisons came. And always, Devadatta felt he came up short. The jealousy grew and festered. It poisoned everything good in Devadatta's life. His own achievements brought no joy because they weren't the Buddha's achievements. His own students' devotion felt meaningless because it wasn't the devotion the Buddha received. He couldn't rest, couldn't be satisfied, couldn't find peace. His whole existence had become consumed by the comparison, by the burning need to be better than, greater than, more revered than his cousin. Finally, the jealousy drove him to madness. He decided that if he couldn't surpass the Buddha, he would destroy him. He hired archers to kill him. When that failed, he tried to crush him with a boulder pushed from a cliff. When that failed, he released a wild elephant onto the path where the Buddha was walking. But the Buddha, seeing the charging elephant, did not run. He stood calmly, radiating compassion. And the elephant, feeling that compassion, stopped in its tracks, its rage dissolving. It knelt before the Buddha, and the Buddha gently touched its head. Devadatta, watching from a distance, felt something crack inside him. Not triumph, not vindication, but a terrible, hollow despair. He had failed even at this. And more than that, he saw in that moment what he had become. A man so consumed by jealousy that he had tried to murder his own cousin. A man so lost in comparison that he had destroyed his own integrity, his own soul. He collapsed, weeping. The Buddha came to him, not with anger or judgment, but with deep sadness and compassion. "Cousin," the Buddha said gently, "what have you done to yourself? You have let jealousy eat away everything good in you. You have made your whole life a mirror reflecting only what you lack, never what you have. You have spent years destroying yourself, one envious thought at a time." Devadatta looked up, tears streaming down his face. "How do I stop?" he asked, his voice broken. How do I stop comparing myself to you? How do I stop feeling like my life is worthless because it's not yours? The Buddha sat beside him in the dust. By seeing that my life is not a measure of yours, by understanding that your worth is not determined by how you compare to anyone else, by recognizing that jealousy is born from the belief that there isn't enough recognition, enough love, enough value to go around. But that's a lie. My enlightenment doesn't diminish your potential. My student's devotion doesn't reduce the value of your teaching. There is room for all of us to shine, each in our own way. But everyone loves you, Devadatta said bitterly. Everyone praises you, and that has nothing to do with you. The Buddha replied, You have been trying to live my life instead of your own. You have been competing in a race that only exists in your mind. No one asked you to be me. No one expects you to be me. The suffering you feel is entirely self-created, born from comparing what is with what you wish were. Over time, with great difficulty, Devadatta began to release his jealousy. It didn't happen quickly or easily. The pattern of comparison was deeply ingrained, the habit of measuring himself against others almost automatic. But slowly, painfully, he learned to turn his attention inward, to ask not, am I as good as him? But am I becoming who I'm meant to be? And in that shift, he found a kind of peace he had never known. Not the peace of being better than, just the peace of being. This story cuts close to the bone for many of us. We live in a culture that runs on comparison. Social media has turned everyone's life into a highlight reel we measure ourselves against. We scroll and compare and feel the knife turn. They're more successful, more attractive, more loved, more accomplished, more enlightened, more everything than we are. And it destroys us, just like it destroyed Devadatta. Not quickly or obviously, but slowly, insidiously. Jealousy eats away our joy. Every good thing in our lives gets tainted by the thought that it's not as good as what someone else has. Every accomplishment feels hollow because someone else accomplished more. Think honestly about who your Devadatta Buddha relationship is with. Who do you compare yourself to obsessively? Maybe it's a sibling who seems to have it all figured out. Maybe it's a colleague who gets all the recognition. Maybe it's a friend whose life looks perfect on Instagram. Maybe it's an ex who seems to be thriving without you. Maybe it's just some idealized version of yourself you can never measure up to. Whoever it is, that comparison is poisoning you. It's making it impossible to appreciate your own life because you're constantly measuring it against theirs. It's robbing you of joy in your accomplishments because they're not their accomplishments. It's turning your relationships, your work, your whole existence into a competition you can't win. Because here's the truth. Comparison is unwinnable. There will always be someone with more success, more beauty, more happiness, more wisdom. Always. If your worth depends on being better than others, you're setting yourself up for permanent dissatisfaction. You're making your peace conditional on something you cannot control. Devadatta had real gifts. He could have lived a fulfilling life, contributed meaningfully to the world, found his own path. But he wasted it all, sacrificed it all to jealousy. He spent his whole existence trying to be his cousin instead of being himself. And in doing so, he became neither. He became just a hollow shell defined entirely by envy. What are you sacrificing to jealousy? What joys are you unable to feel because you're too busy comparing? What gifts of your own are you ignoring because they're not someone else's gifts? What version of yourself are you failing to become because you're so focused on being some other version that isn't yours to be? The Buddha's response to Devadatta is worth sitting with. He didn't gloat. He didn't say, "I'm better than you." He looked at his cousin with compassion and showed him the trap he'd built for himself. He offered a way out. Stop comparing. Start living your own life. Recognize that someone else's success doesn't diminish your value. This is not easy. Our minds are trained in comparison. We've been doing it since childhood, measuring ourselves against classmates, siblings, neighbors. We've been taught that life is a competition and someone has to lose. Breaking free from that conditioning requires real work. But it starts with seeing the cost. Seeing what jealousy is actually doing to you. Not just the obvious suffering of envy, but the deeper tragedy of a life unlived, of potential unused, of your own unique path abandoned because you were so busy trying to walk someone else's. You are not them. You will never be them. And that's not a tragedy. That's just the truth. Your life is not meant to be their life. Your gifts are not meant to be their gifts. Your path is not meant to be their path. And when you finally stop trying to be them and start being you, when you finally stop measuring yourself against them and start living according to your own values, your own purpose, your own nature, that's when peace becomes possible. Not the peace of being better than, just the peace of being. The peace of knowing your worth isn't determined by comparison. The peace of appreciating what you have instead of mourning what you lack. The peace of running your own race instead of competing in someone else's. Rest now in this possibility. Let the comparison relax. Let the jealousy loosen its grip. You are enough, exactly as you are, with exactly what you have. Someone else's abundance doesn't create your lack. Someone else's light doesn't dim yours. There is room for all of us to shine. Let yourself shine in your own way. Let yourself be exactly who you are. Not better than, not worse than, just yourself. That's all you need to be. That's all you were ever meant to be. The Buddha's final teaching. The Buddha was old now. His body, which had carried him through so many years of teaching, so many miles of walking from village to village, was failing. His disciples gathered around him, their hearts heavy with approaching loss. They had spent decades following him, learning from him, depending on his guidance. How would they continue without him? The Buddha looked at their worried faces with great tenderness. He understood their fear. They had made him into their anchor, their certainty in an uncertain world. And now that anchor was being lifted. "Teacher," one disciple finally asked, the question they all carried, "Who will lead us when you're gone? Who will tell us what to do? Who will answer our questions?" The Buddha was silent for a long moment, his breath shallow but steady. Then he spoke, his voice soft but clear. "I am not your teacher," he said. The disciples looked at each other in confusion. What did he mean? Of course he was their teacher. They had called him that for years. They had followed his teachings, lived by his example. "You are your own teacher," the Buddha continued. "You always have been. I never taught you anything you didn't already know. I only reminded you what you had forgotten. I only pointed to what was always there, waiting for you to notice." He paused, gathering strength. "When I am gone, Do not look for me in statues or texts or temples. Do not make an authority out of my words. Do not cling to my teachings as if they are the truth rather than pointing toward truth. I am just a man who woke up, and that waking up is available to you too. Not because I give it to you, but because it is your nature. The disciples were crying now, but he continued. Be a lamp unto yourself, he said, each word deliberate. Do not look outside for the light. You contain it already. You have always contained it. Every question you've asked me, I have simply turned back toward you. Where does the question come from? Who is asking? What already knows? He looked at each of them. After I die, some will want to make me into a god. Do not let them. I am not a god. I am not special. I am simply someone who stopped running, who turned inward, who looked clearly at the nature of suffering and found the way through it. And that same capacity is in you, in every human being. It does not require me. It never did. One disciple, Ananda, who had been the Buddha's closest attendant, asked through his tears, "But how will we know if we're doing it right? How will we know if we're on the right path?" The Buddha smiled gently. You will know by whether your suffering decreases. You will know by whether you become more compassionate, more free, more at peace. You will know by whether you need me less, not more. If your practice makes you more dependent on external authorities, more rigid in your beliefs, more certain that you have the only answer, then you have lost the way. But if your practice makes you more open, more questioning, more humble, more kind, then you are walking toward truth. He took a breath, his body visibly weakening. The teachings I have given you are not commandments. They are not rules to follow blindly. They are tools, methods, possibilities. Use what works. Discard what doesn't. Test everything against your own experience. The Buddha you seek is not me. It is your own awakened nature. The disciples sat with this, their teacher's final lesson settling into them like seeds in soil. He was not giving them something to hold on to. He was asking them to let go. Let go of their dependence on him. Let go of their need for an external authority. Let go of the belief that someone else could do their awakening for them. Be a lamp unto yourself, he repeated, his voice fading. When the darkness comes, when you don't know what to do, when you feel lost and confused, do not look for me. Do not ask what I would have done. Go inward. Sit quietly. Listen to your own wisdom. Trust your own capacity to know what is true. These were his last words. Be a lamp unto yourself. And then he was gone, releasing his breath into the air, returning to the elements from which his body had been temporarily formed. The disciples sat with his body through the night, and slowly, painfully, they began to understand what he had been telling them all along. He had never been the source of their peace. He had only pointed them back toward themselves. Every teaching had been an invitation to wake up, not to him, but to their own nature. Every instruction had been a tool to help them remove the obstacles they had built between themselves and their own wisdom. In the years that followed, some forgot this final teaching. They made temples and statues. They created elaborate rituals and hierarchies. They turned his words into scripture and his person into something divine. They did exactly what he had asked them not to do. But others remembered. Others took his final teaching to heart. They became lamps unto themselves. They questioned everything. They tested the teachings against their own experience. They walked their own paths, using his insights as guideposts, but not as commandments. They awakened not to his truth, but to their own. And this continues today. Some still make authorities of teachers, gurus, scriptures. They look outside for what can only be found within. They wait for someone to tell them they're doing it right, to confirm their experience, to give them permission to trust themselves. But others hear the Buddha's final teaching and take it seriously. They honor teachers while recognizing that teachers can only point. They study teachings while understanding that teachings are tools, not truths. They practice methods while remaining free to adapt, question, and ultimately transcend those methods. This teaching is perhaps the most radical one of all. It dismantles the entire authority structure. It removes the comforting crutch of external certainty. It asks you to grow up spiritually, to stop looking for a parent to tell you what to do, and to start trusting your own capacity to know. Think about where you're still looking outside yourself. Where are you waiting for someone to give you permission? Where are you seeking validation from an authority figure instead of checking in with your own knowing? Where have you made someone else's truth more important than your own experience? Maybe it's a spiritual teacher you've elevated beyond human status. Maybe it's a therapist whose words you treat as gospel. Maybe it's a book you consult before consulting yourself. Maybe it's any external system you've given power to determine what's true for you. The Buddha's final teaching says, stop. Turn inward. You are the authority on your own life. You are the one who knows what you need. You are the lamp. Not because you're special or enlightened or superior, but because you're conscious. Because awareness itself has the capacity to know truth when it encounters it. Because wisdom is not external to you. It's not something you acquire. It's something you already are. Beneath all the conditioning and confusion, this doesn't mean you don't learn from others. It doesn't mean you ignore wisdom wherever it appears. But it means you never outsource your knowing. You never hand over your authority. You never make anyone, not even the Buddha himself, into the source of your truth. Be a lamp unto yourself. When you're confused, sit with the confusion. When you don't know what to do, sit with the not knowing. When you feel lost, sit with being lost. Don't immediately reach for a book, a teacher, a system to tell you what this means and what to do about it. First, turn inward. First, listen to your own wisdom. First, trust that you have the capacity to know. And here's what's beautiful about this teaching. The Buddha was confident enough in what he had taught to let it go. He wasn't worried that without him his teachings would die. He wasn't worried that his students would forget everything. He trusted that he had planted seeds that would grow in their own way, in their own time, bearing fruit he couldn't predict or control. He trusted them. And more than that, he trusted the nature of consciousness itself. He trusted that truth is not fragile, not dependent on any one person to carry it forward. Truth is always available to anyone who looks clearly, who questions honestly, who lets go of their attachments to belief. You are that consciousness. You are that capacity to wake up. You are the lamp. Not someday when you're more enlightened. Not after you've done more practice or read more books or found the right teacher. Right now. This awareness that's reading these words, this presence that's experiencing this moment. That's the lamp. That's what lights the way. The Buddha died so his students would finally understand that they didn't need him. That his life was not the path but a pointer toward the path. That his awakening was not something to worship but something to replicate in their own unique way. And now, all these centuries later, the teaching remains the same. Be a lamp unto yourself. Stop looking outside for what's already within. Stop making authorities of those who are simply fellow travelers. Stop treating teachings as commandments instead of invitations. Your wisdom is here. Your peace is here. Your capacity to know truth is here. Not somewhere else. Not in someone else. Here. In you. Now, trust that. Live from that. Be that. The Buddha's final gift was his absence. The space he left for you to finally stand on your own, to walk your own path, to be your own light. Don't waste that gift by filling the space with new dependencies, new authorities, new ways of looking outside yourself. Step into it. Own it. Be the lamp he knew you already were. Closing, and so we come to the end of tonight's journey through these ancient teachings. We've walked together through forests where killers found redemption, through rivers where monks learned flexibility, through villages where generosity transformed hearts. We've sat beside pools that taught us about stillness, listened to streams that knew when to withdraw, watched bamboo bend in storms and elephants reveal their mysterious wholeness. Each story, a small door opening into understanding. Each teaching a mirror reflecting something you already knew but had perhaps forgotten. The burning house reminding you to see what you've been ignoring. The lost ox showing you that what you seek has never been lost. The pool teaching you that your clarity returns when you stop stirring. The middle way inviting you into balance. The generous king revealing the joy of giving without measure. These are not just stories from long ago and far away. They are alive right now in your own life. The jealousy of Devadatta, the transformation of Angulimala, the awakening of the beggar who discovered his wealth. These patterns live in you, waiting to be recognized, waiting to guide you home to yourself. The Buddha's final teaching echoes through all of it. Be a lamp unto yourself. You don't need to remember every story. You don't need to analyze every teaching. You don't need to figure it all out. You just need to trust that something has shifted. Some seed has been planted. Some doorway has opened that wasn't open before. Let these teachings work on you in the darkness as you sleep. Let them settle into places words cannot reach. Let them become part of the quiet, knowing that guides you when you're not thinking about being guided. Before you drift completely into sleep, if you found peace in these stories, if you'd like to return to this space again, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you feel moved to share your experience, leave a comment about where you're listening from, what time it is in your corner of the world. We're all here together, separated by distance, but connected by this shared search for peace. But more than any of that, just rest. Rest knowing you've done enough for today. Rest knowing you are enough, exactly as you are. Rest knowing that transformation doesn't require your effort, only your willingness to let these teachings touch you. The stories continue in you now. They become part of your dreams, part of how you see the world tomorrow, part of the wisdom you carry forward. Not because you're trying to remember them, but because they've already become part of you. Sleep well, dear friend. May your rest be deep. May your dreams be peaceful. May you wake tomorrow with a little more clarity, a little more compassion, a little more freedom than you had today. The lamp is lit. You are the light. Rest now in that knowing. Good night.